Mr. Speaker, as always, it is with great pleasure that I deliver my budget address in this House. This speech marks my 9th budget contribution as a Member of Parliament and my 5th as a Government Minister. It is, Mr. Speaker, my 2nd budget address as Minister with responsibilities for business, employment, postal services and the Department of Social Security. During the course of my contribution, I will report on the projects undertaken over the past financial year, and I will set out my Ministry's objectives for this financial year. With your indulgence, I will start with my social security responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, as this House will know, prior to the 31st of December of 1984, married women whose husbands were paying social insurance contributions and widows who were in employment or self-employment had a choice of paying either the reduced married women rate of contribution or the full rate of social insurance contribution. This option is no longer available, but continues to apply to existing contributors on a personal-to-holder basis. Married women who opted to pay this reduced social insurance contribution were not entitled to claim old age pension in their own right on attaining the age of 60. They could only claim an old age pension at the dependence allowance rate based on the husband's insurance record once the husband reached the age of 65. As the House will also know, the dependence allowance is paid at half the rate payable to the husband. With effect from April of this year, the government introduced legislation to allow married women who paid or are paying the reduced social insurance contribution, or women who have not paid contributions as self-employed persons, to make retrospective payments of the difference between the reduced social insurance and the full social insurance contribution. If the minimum contribution conditions for pension purposes are met, they will be entitled to a pension in their own right when they reach the age of 60 or enhance their existing pension rate. Mr. Speaker, I would like to stress that this opportunity will be available until the 31st of March of next year. Mr. Speaker, as this House has been informed, the entire process of awarding disability allowance was reformed with effect from July of last year. The Department of Social Security, which administers the allowance, was finding it increasingly difficult to consider the applications received in a just and equitable manner based on the brief guidelines available and the absence of professional medical advice. With this in mind, the former Director of Social Security and I took the initiative of overhauling the disability allowance arrangements and introducing a new set of eligibility criteria together with an entirely new assessment process. In this respect, the disability allowance is no longer awarded on the basis of a particular health condition or impairment, but on the impact that such a condition has on the everyday life of the person or his or her carer. An assessment panel made up of health professionals from a range of different health disciplines, including a physician, a psychologist, a physiotherapist, and an occupational therapist, bringing together diverse expertise and skills, was set up to assess disability allowance applications. As a consequence, entitlement to the allowance is now determined in a new, fairer and objective assessment of an individual's needs based on professional medical advice. Panel members may request further assessment from relevant professionals or further medical information to help them in their assessment. The ultimate decision, however, rests with the Director, who will make a determination on the award based on the panel's professional recommendation and taking into account all relevant circumstances. If an applicant appeals a decision, the assessment panel composed of different members will convene and reassess the application. The procedure will ensure that the second assessment is considered afresh. As a result, those individuals whose health condition or impairment has the greatest impact on their day-to-day lives and require the most support are fully caught by our reforms. Mr. Speaker, we have worked towards achieving a system that will assess individual needs, ensure consistency of decision-making, and make the whole process fair and objective. It gives me great satisfaction to say that nearly a year after the inception of the new arrangement, all historical applications have been assessed and all current applications are addressed in a timely manner. In this respect, I wish to place on the record my sincere thanks to the hard-working professionals who volunteer of their time to fulfill this important endeavour. Mr. Speaker, the House is aware that Gibraltar old age pensions and survivors' benefits were increased by 1.6% with effect from the 1st of August of last year. In previous years, pensions were increased in line with the annual increase in general index of retail prices. Last year, however, the increase was a mere 0.1%, and for this reason, it was decided to apply the same increase as in the previous year. Furthermore, the minimum income guarantee was also increased by 1.6%. Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable the Chief Minister announced in his budget address, old age pension will increase by the retail price index with effect from the 1st of August. Further, Mr. Speaker, last year was announced that maternity grant would increase from £600 to £700 for births that occurred after the 1st of August of 2015. I know that this increase has been very welcome indeed by all parents enjoying a new addition to the family. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my responsibilities for the Royal Gibraltar Post Office. On the 1st of January, the RGPO launched the UN Universal Postal Union Customs Declaration Kiosk system on its webpage to meet the new security requirements for mail items entering the EU. Effective from the 1st of May, the EU makes the provision of advanced electronic information mandatory for postal items entering the EU. Customers sending international mail will no longer have to rely on their own handwriting being correctly interpreted or on a single hard copy of the customs declaration label safely reaching its destination. They can now use the customs declaration kiosk system to provide the customs declaration data in a quick and accurate manner while maintaining full control of the declaration. At destination, Mr. Speaker, the availability of this declaration data allows customs to prepare risk assessments in advance, enabling nimble inbound customs process. Currently, the customs declaration kiosk system makes use of the system's unique postal lookup engine to suggest tariff codes for the goods being sent abroad. In the short term, the kiosk will include warnings on prohibitions and restrictions, as well as postal address validation. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore gratifying that I quote from the Post Europe News saying, "The RGPO is one of the postal operators spearheading this revolution, having already integrated the CDS kiosk on their website. At points of lodging, dedicated customer-facing kiosks are being rolled out to enforce the declaration data capture of all international mail items." Further, Mr. Speaker, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the UN Postal Union to facilitate in the area relating to the interface between customs declaration and HM Customs Asekuda, where the RGPO is the pilot country. Given the increasingly sensitive aviation safety and security issues facing the global postal network, and in recognition of the Royal Gibraltar Post Office leading in the area on dangerous goods awareness, the RGPO is the cover story in the UN Universal Postal Union Postal publication, yet again giving Gibraltar a very positive global exposure. Further, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform the House that due to the success of the Post and Go kiosks, the Gibraltar House kiosk in London has been to the World Stamp Show in New York to launch its new macaque stamp. The RGPO kiosk was also on the front cover of the special edition of the Intelligent AR magazine. It's important to note that since the installation of these kiosks at Gibraltar House in London and the premises of the RGPO, almost £40,000 of revenue has been raised. Mr. Speaker, another area where the RGPO has taken centre stage is in improving quality measurement between two countries. The RGPO set up a trial of different radio frequency identification transponders to give 100% visibility of mail bags arriving in the UK. The trial was a great success and created a demand for the RGPO to share the best practice. The CEO of the RGPO has presented to 3 different UN Universal Postal Union committees with other countries like the Netherlands that want to carry out a data exchange with Gibraltar. The RGPO has now introduced RFID readers in the cargo shed at the Gibraltar airport and is now the only country to place passive RFID in all of its mail bags. Mr. Speaker, during this summer, the RGPO should introduce the latest postal track and trace system called IPS Post to meet its mandatory obligations for data exchange. IPS Post is an application for handling international mail. The IPS Post application will allow postal organizations to store and exchange data related to the mail handling process. IPS Post records information about mail events that happen to an item during each step of the international mail handling process. The RGPO can use the IPS Post system to identify each mail event, that is to say, the specific steps of the mail handling process as defined in international postal regulations that happens to an item from the time it is received from the customer until it is delivered. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, it is with great satisfaction that I can confirm that additional cargo space was secured with Monarch Airlines from Monday, the 6th of July of last year. This has meant that backlog of mail is reduced and is delivered to the recipient sooner. The collaboration was the direct result of a meeting held between the Chief Executive Officer of the RGPO, the Monarch Airlines Cargo Services and myself. I'm sure that honourable members opposite had no idea that postal work could be quite so exciting. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my responsibilities for commercial affairs, and before I turn to the tremendous work that the government has achieved in reducing the costs of doing business, let me ask the Honourable Mr. Clinton to take good note of all of the matters that I will highlight. Mr. Speaker, his contribution on small businesses, if measured by its length, could politely be described as superficial or perhaps perfunctory. In all, Mr. Speaker, 7 paragraphs, the longest of which was a cut and paste from the GFSB survey, in respect of which there is no analysis beyond repeating the concerns of some of its members. On the other hand, if the honourable member's comments on small businesses were analysed frankly for the quality of his analysis, then I must describe it as shocking for its complete lack of knowledge on all of the work that this government has carried out, not just in reducing the administrative burden on businesses, but in revolutionising the way businesses are now licensed and in slashing business costs. I will have much more to say to Mr. Clinton at the conclusion of my section on small businesses on the honourable member's inexplicable neglect of his duties as a spokesperson on SMEs, evidenced not least by the absence of a single question by him at question time. I start with the excellent and newly established Office of Fair Trading. Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to confirm that in October of last year, the Office of Fair Trading, or the OFT, as it is commonly known, opened its doors pursuant to the enactment of the Fair Trading Act. A lot of work continues to be devoted to this project, and I'm happy to say that Gibraltar now boasts a statutory regulator that caters exclusively to the needs of businesses and consumers. As this House is aware, 3 pre-existing government departments merged to create the OFT: the Department of Consumer Affairs, the Trade Licensing Section, and the Business Support Unit. The OFT is, in addition, responsible for the implementation of the new business licensing system and the establishment of the single point of contact, which I will address shortly. The office is dedicated to maintaining the highest business standards in Gibraltar and is already serving to bolster the confidence of entrepreneurs and consumers in a local market, which I am confident is resulting in a positive knock-on effect in our economy. The OFT, Mr. Speaker, is staffed by seasoned public servants who are experienced in consumer protection, licensing matters, and providing support to businesses. Furthermore, the operation and management of the new office is carried out by a legally qualified Chief Executive Officer who brings to the administration of public services his own experience of working in the private sector. The staff at the OFT have, since before the office was formally established in October, developed a very productive working relationship with other government departments, not least the Income Tax Office, the Department of Employment, HM Customs, and non-governmental bodies such as Companies House. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, written protocols are already in place with the Income Tax Office, the Port Authority, and the Department of Employment to ensure the highest level of practical cooperation. In addition, The OFT, in conjunction with Customs, created a new approved goods list that categorizes all goods that are traded in Gibraltar into a simple, easy-to-use and informative list. Further, the OFT staff's experience and contacts are proving invaluable to the one-stop shop service that the office offers to start-up businesses. The OFT continues to work towards even greater cooperation with other bodies for the continued improvement of its services. Mr. Speaker, the OFT and my ministry are involved in a substantially progressed consultation with the Chamber of Commerce and the Gibraltar Federation of Small Businesses to deliver some changes to the Fair Trading Act, which we mutually agree are desirable. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, I will be in a position to publish an amending bill in the last quarter of this year that I am certain will iron out the small creases that we have witnessed in the first 8 months since the commencement of the Act. Mr. Speaker, under the Fair Trading Act, new guidance codes have been set for tourism service providers, real estate service providers, and for businesses handling client monies in Gibraltar. The code set out industry best practice guidelines, and non-compliance will be investigated and, where necessary, appropriate action taken by the OFT. These codes of conduct are, among other matters, concerned with the protection of deposit monies that are paid by consumers, which in our view require specific protection. Businesses handling client monies or holding financial deposits are required to provide evidence of a separate client account to the OFT. I hope that Mr. Clinton has taken note. Mr. Speaker, one of the most exciting changes in the establishment of the OFT's single point of contact, whose aim is to ease the administrative burden of establishing a business in Gibraltar. Mr. Speaker, budding business persons are no longer obliged to navigate the labyrinthine administrative morass to start up a business or to keep their business license extant. It goes without saying, Mr. Speaker, that speed to market is essential, and it is important that administrative procedures do not get in the way of entrepreneurialism and innovation. The Office of Fair Trading assists in focusing new business applications to the right government departments by the office itself, speedily and from one single venue. Entrepreneurs may visit the OFT's conveniently located office at Europort and receive guidance to complete their registration and licensing processes. The team will then distribute all these forms as necessary to the other departments. In other words, Mr. Speaker, whereas before, and certainly during the time that the GSD were in government, which Mr. Clinton now represents in this House, a person would have to attend every establishment, every relevant government office necessary to obtain a business license, such as the Environmental Agency, the Town Planning Department, the Employment Service, and the Department of Social Security, among others. Today, that same person only needs to attend the OFT, is assisted by an experienced official in filling the forms, and that same official distributes the form to the departments and completes the process with the client. So the business person who previously had to navigate his or her way through Gibraltar and all of those government departments now only deals in one office with one person. The call by the business community for a single counter service, ignored for over 16 years, has finally been answered and allows entrepreneurs to concentrate on what they do best, Mr. Speaker, run a successful business. And further, Mr. Speaker, in the same way as businesses are called to innovate and provide wide-reaching methods of doing business remotely, we as an administration are also committed to providing the ability to businesses to deal with government departments easily and efficiently online. Businesses are therefore now able to complete and submit forms required for business licensing online via the e-government website. Furthermore, downloadable versions of all the relevant forms for each of the government departments are also available on the OFT's website. Mr. Speaker, as I noted some moments ago, the commencement of the OFT saw the absorption of the Department of Consumer Affairs, which has become the OFT's Consumer Protection section. While the team members themselves have not changed, the nature of the work carried out by the team has shifted from a mediatory role to a regulatory one. The ultimate aim of the Consumer Protection Division is to prevent harm to consumers. The Act has given the OFT much needed teeth by the creation of consumer protection enforcers to ensure that all businesses comply with this legislation. CP enforcers can visit local traders to review their business practices, inspect weighing and measuring equipment used for trade, and check business licenses to ensure they are in place and up to date. Consumer protection officers are also empowered to monitor and check advertisements for accuracy, inspect and test goods for safety, ensure that no person is selling goods to consumers without a license, and investigate business practices that the OFT may consider to be significantly harmful to consumers. The members of the team have undergone training from the Chartered Trading Standards Institute earlier this year, which, with previous training from the Royal Gibraltar Police, ensures best practice methods and procedures when using their enforcement powers. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to business licensing, previously known as trade licensing. In accordance with the Fair Trading Act, the functions of the Trade Licensing Authority have been transferred and subsumed within the remit of the OFT and are undertaken by the BLA, the Business Licensing Authority. The new licensing system created by the Act now requires that all businesses in Gibraltar that are not regulated by another enactment are licensed. This, Mr. Speaker, clears the irrational differentiation in law between the requirements of business to trade in goods and those that provide services. The introduction of the BLA has also marked a significant increase in due diligence checks at the time of applying for a business license to ensure that, among other things, all applicants carrying on business do so from adequate premises and are properly registered and up to date at Companies House. Mr. Speaker, it is well worth remembering that the Act contains a statutory presumption in favour of carrying on business in Gibraltar subject to obtaining the licence. As a result, the new statutory system allows the BLA Secretariat to consider and approve straightforward applications, allowing the BLA Board to consider complex applications. All decisions taken by the Secretariat are communicated to the BLA and are based on precedents previously established by the Board. This is the effect of dramatically improving the speed in which applications are processed, where all documents are received and the applications do not need to be referred to the Board. Applications are processed within 3 working days, Mr. Speaker. Quite sharp, I'd say. Crucially, the BLA has the ability to deploy the OFT CP enforcers to investigate businesses that it suspects are not in possession of a valid business license. Another significant change that improves the efficiency of the business licensing process is that the BLA is now required by statute to meet fortnightly rather than monthly. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my responsibilities for small and medium-sized businesses. As I never tire of saying, small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy, and the government must enable the right conditions for businesses to flourish. It is significant to note that collectively, small and medium-sized businesses are Gibraltar's biggest employer. It therefore gives me great satisfaction, Mr. Speaker, to set out the many budgetary measures that the government introduced to buttress the right legal, regulatory, economic and fiscal conditions for success. Mr. Speaker, let me highlight some of the main measures. The government has, in the first place, maintained energy prices at the same rates since 2011, with a promise not to increase the same for an additional 4 years. Mr. Speaker, I should remind this House that the previous administration admitted that had it proceeded with the Lathbury Barracks power plant, utility costs would have increased by 5% an annum. This, therefore, already represents a saving for small businesses of 20% over 4 years. Further still, in addition to this 20% saving, we need to add the 5.6% discount over the last 4 financial years, representing inflation over that period. So in total, so far, a saving of 25.65%. Even further still, Mr. Speaker, this does not take into account the important amount by which the government subsidises the costs of electricity. It is important, therefore, for the business community to reflect on the effect on their business costs if the government were to remove such a subsidy. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have not increased social insurance contributions in 4, nay 5 financial years, Mr. Speaker. Rather, government has abolished employers' contributions in respect of an employee's secondary employment, subject to the full contribution having been paid once in Gibraltar. As the Honourable the Chief Minister has noted, we will need to consider developments in the UK arising from the Brexit vote, and we may have to review the position later on in the year. Thirdly, we have undertaken import duty reductions on the widest range of goods. This year has been no different, Mr. Speaker, and there have been even further import duty reductions on 12 items. Our anecdotal evidence, however, firmly suggests that, regrettably, some traders are not passing such savings to consumers. Fourthly, we have provided discounts for early repayment of rates of 65% for businesses in the first year of trading for new set-up companies. For those new companies that had already received a 50% general rates discount in the first year of trading since the scheme was introduced, they were given a 25% discount in the second year of trading. Fifth, Mr. Speaker, we have increased the discount for early payment of rates from 10% to 15% for offices, workshops, construction and manufacturing industries, transport and distribution industries. This discount will of course continue once again in this financial year. We have allowed companies, partnerships and self-employed individuals to claim 100% of its eligible capital allowance in the first year of trade in order to further incentivize new businesses to set up in what the economist has called our tiger-like economy and generate further economic activity. Further still, following proposals from ATCOM in order to incentivize training in the workplace, allowed training costs as an expense against profits of a business or company at the rate of 150%. Mr. Speaker, that means that a company that invests £1,000 in training its employees with a view to them obtaining an accredited qualification will now be able to claim £1,500 as a deduction against profit for the accounting period in the tax computation. Even further still, we have raised the audit threshold, that is to say, the level of turnover beyond which audited accounts are required, from £1 million to £1.25 million, a measure that did not go down very well with my girlfriend as a qualified accountant. On the ninth point, Mr. Speaker, in order to assist small-scale startups, introduced a capped 200% credit in respect of the cost of any architect's fees incurred in respect of successful planning applications under the Town Planning Act, and any fees charged by government in respect of any such planning application made by such a company in respect of its property in the first 24 months of operation. Further still, to further encourage and assist small businesses and startup companies, we introduced a social insurance credit of £100 per employee in respect of employers' contribution for companies who have 10 or less employees. And as the 11th budget busting measure for small businesses, Mr. Speaker, an additional startup incentive scheme was announced this year by the Honourable the Chief Minister. Any company that sets up in Gibraltar over the next 12 months and meets various conditions, among others, that it must be a new business, must employ 5 employees in the first year, and that the business is not a transfer of a business previously existing or one that is used as a transfer pricing mechanism to allocate profits from a business previously existing, is eligible for the scheme. And the excellent incentive, Mr. Speaker, is that over the first 3 financial years of trading, the business, which can be a company or a limited partnership, will be eligible for a tax credit equal to the tax due up to a maximum of £50,000 over each of the first 3 years. The tax credit does not carry forward from one year to the next and is not eligible for repayment. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the incentive acts as a mechanism to shelter a liability to tax up to the maximum of tax equivalent to £50,000 per annum, effectively sheltering £500,000 of profits every year. Mr. Speaker, in the light of all of the measures I have just mentioned, the Business Support Unit has carried out an internal exercise to determine how all these measures have affected businesses in Gibraltar. I am very grateful to the two businesses in Main Street and the one just outside Main Street, which helped us in this task. In essence, Mr. Speaker, we factored into our financial comparison analysis the costs in relation to social insurance, the minimum wage, electricity and water, salt water and rates, licence fees and import duty since this administration was elected, and compared and contrasted the cost of doing business over the last 5 years over the average cost of doing business when the honourable members opposite were in government. Mr. Speaker, the forensic analysis determined that in 5 years, the Main Street businesses have made a saving of just over £17,000 and £18,000 respectively, and the business just outside Main Street made a saving of nearly £9,000. It is therefore estimated that with this administration, the businesses that participated in our exercises had saved, on average, approximately a staggering £3,500 every year, and the business just outside Main Street made a saving of just over £1,700. Mr. Speaker, by any objective measure and analysis, keeping the costs of business is well and truly down under this business-friendly administration. Mr. Speaker, yet another measure which continues to be of great benefit to businesses is the Gibraltar Business Nurturing Scheme, or GBNS, that was introduced last year. It may be useful, Mr. Speaker, to quickly explain the logistics of the process for Mr. Clinton and for those who may be interested in applying. The application process for these loans sees applicants complete a simple form. The applications are scored by a committee comprised of a Chamber representative, a GFSB representative, and a government official. The scores take into consideration the purpose of the loan and evaluates the application against set criteria, ranging from evidence of demand, innovation, sustainability, value for money, the safeguarding and creation of jobs, environmental and health impact, e-commerce, urban renewal, and touristic value. Applications are given a preliminary score. Applicants who obtain a satisfactory score meet with the committee. The meeting allows the applicant to meet with individuals operating in the business field and avail themselves of a steer prior to launching or expanding their business. After the meetings, the scores are finalised and a majority recommendation is made for my final approval. As always, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to accept 100% of the committee's recommendations. As we all know, Mr. Speaker, seed capital is an essential part of starting a business or accelerating an existing business. The GBNS has eased the financial burden on aspiring entrepreneurs who may have had an exciting business idea but lacked the funds to proceed. The GBNS has also assisted existing businesses that required an injection of capital in order to expand or diversify their business. The GBNS has proved to be a popular mechanism with 19 applications received in the last financial year and 7 successful applications approved. The GBNS has received a second batch of 17 applications which the committee is currently processing. The availability, Mr. Speaker, of sound and repayable finance is not just vital to grow our economy, but is equally important in creating employment opportunities, generating government revenue, fostering technological innovation, and expanding the range of goods and services enjoyed by consumers. Mr. Speaker, what economists call a virtuous economic cycle. Mr. Speaker, as I have just highlighted, over the past 4 years, and indeed in this financial year, the government has already introduced a series of budgetary measures to assist and encourage startups. In this financial year, we will start work with the GFSB and the Gibraltar Chamber of Commerce to consider the elements of an incubator scheme for startups, where startups can be nurtured for the first year of their existence. This will be particularly useful for startups in the software and technology industries, which we will seek to further nurture, and I am personally thrilled to pursue this particular project. Mr. Speaker, I must also mention that the Business Support Unit last year organised 16 seminars which became very popular and covered a whole range of topics aimed at providing the local business community with guidance and support. The BSU is currently in the process of preparing a new programme for this year, which I very much look forward to launch. Mr. Speaker, therefore there is no question that in the past 4.5 years we have worked extremely closely with representatives of the local business community, which I'm happy to consider friends, and that we have heard and moved on their representations and helped where possible with individual concerns and cases. Government will, of course, continue to listen to the business community and move swiftly to tackle any issues that may arise. We will continue to engage in meaningful dialogue with the GFSB, the Gibraltar Chamber of Commerce and individual traders. Further, Mr. Speaker, in the light of the UK referendum result, and in keeping with the Honourable the Chief Minister's pledge to set up various working groups, I will invite the Chamber, the GFSB and other stakeholders to analyse the possible consequences of Gibraltar leaving the UK and Gibraltar leaving the EU, of which I will say a little more later, and devise different models depending on the various outcomes. And it is in the light of this robust legal, regulatory, fiscal and economic architecture that this government has rolled out in its first mandate, and which I have just set out in detail, that Mr. Clinton's glib lip service to small businesses must be judged. Mr. Speaker, such is the Honourable Mr. Clinton's intimate knowledge of the concerns of businesses that he referred to the Gibraltar Federation of Small Businesses throughout his 30 seconds of small businesses as the GSFB. In other words, the Gibraltar Small Federation of Businesses. Not quite the same thing, Mr. Speaker, not least given that the GFSB represents at least half of the business community that he pretends to care about. Mr. Speaker, I almost fell off my chair when he called the increase in business licenses a stealth tax. Mr. Speaker, is he so disengaged with a public political process that he is unaware that the FTA was the product of the fullest consultation with the Chamber and the GFSB over 3 entire years? Does he care so little, Mr. Speaker, about engaging with the representatives of small businesses that he was not aware that both the GFSB and the Chamber, in fact, agreed with the new licensing fees? Mr. Speaker, does he still think that increases of fees which had not been increased since 1988 and agreed in a public consultation is a rise by stealth? Mr. Speaker, I think it is fair to say that it has ranked in the course of this budget debate as one of the most nonsensical statements uttered. It was only fair, surely, to increase fees by inflation in the light of the enforcement powers contained in the FTA. Further, Mr. Speaker, if he had bothered to ask at question time, I would have told him that moving forward, all increases are in line with retail price increases. Mr. Speaker, I could say more, so in fact I will. The Honourable Gentleman in his contribution does not even refer to any one of the excellent business measures that the Honourable the Chief Minister introduced. Not one. Not even the very exciting startup scheme. And Mr. Speaker, in complete illogical defiance of the law of holes, which helpfully suggests to the Honourable Gentleman to stop digging when already in a hole, he says that this government is not transparent. Mr. Speaker, I will urge the Honourable Member to pick any one of the budget replies by the former Chief Minister. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I will invite him to choose any one single question and answer session reflected in Hansard. Any reply and any session will do. And on considering any given one, he will come to the same conclusion as I, that there does not exist any currently accepted mathematical measurement that can fully measure the contrast between our huge level of transparency and theirs when in office. In the absence of such a qualitative measure, Mr. Speaker, I have settled on the basic measure of bucket load. And I will tell him, without hesitation or reserve, that this government is a bucket load more transparent, a bucket load more open, a bucket load more accessible, a bucket load more effective, a bucket load more efficient, and a bucket load more considering and caring than the pernicious and poisonous style of politics that they discharged when in office. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that every time I come to this House prepared, which what I think is quite a statesman-like budget contribution, but they always have to say something that makes my blood boil, and I feel that I must reply. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, it was that pernicious style of politics that motivated me to enter politics in the first place, to excise from the public political life and discourse for good and for better their style of politics. And may I say, Mr. Speaker, mission accomplished. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my responsibilities for employment, where I am sure all honourable members will agree we have not stood still either. Over the past year, the Department of Employment has been improving the quality of the services that it offers to its customers. The digitisation of forms that support the government's objective to ease the administrative burden on businesses, which offers round-the-clock online functionality with virtual access to the department, has been live since October of last year. The portal allows members of the public with an electronic ID card to complete and submit all necessary forms online. In addition, I am very pleased to report that Erasmus 15, a purpose-built programme specifically designed to cater for Gibraltar's particular labour market needs, is fully functional. Bless you. The programme not only performs the basic tasks that are currently carried out by the present system, such as the registration of those in employment, the listing of the unemployed, and other tasks. This uniquely tailored software also carries out operations that we were unable to perform with the previous programmes, such as matching unemployed persons to specific vacancies where certain qualifications or experience are required. The new software accomplishes this by cross-referencing and analysing key information such as qualifications, experience, skills, and other requirements. With the introduction of this programme, Mr. Speaker, along with the option to submit forms online, staff at the Employment Service will be able to operate more efficiently, allowing them to further assist the unemployed or those in employment who are seeking different opportunities. In order to enhance the opportunity of those registered as unemployed, the Department will request all unemployed persons to submit their qualifications. Mr. Speaker, part and parcel of our strategy to keep unemployment down is the effective deployment of the Labour Inspectorate. The inspectors work hard in the field to ensure that all employers comply with employment legislation and that, among other things, vacancies are registered with the Employment Service in good time to allow us to choose suitable persons for companies to interview them. From April of last year to March of this year, the section carried out 848 inspections, 38 fixed penalty notice, and 37 breaches of the Act have been dealt with by regularising employees' positions. In respect of the Health and Safety Inspectorate, I am pleased to report that the Principal Health and Safety Inspector position, which had been vacant since August of 2006, has now been filled and the newly selected candidate is in post. A further 2 posts will now be advertised, bringing the complement of the inspectorate to 5. A new programme of inspections is being considered, and meetings with contractors are taking place to ensure good working practices. Mr. Speaker, the House will also be aware that the Government is currently conducting a substantive review of the legal, regulatory and practical architecture relating to health and safety at the workplace. In this respect, it gives me great pleasure to say that the Government recently introduced a new health and safety policy specifically designed for Gibraltar as part of this ongoing wholesale strategy to develop and strengthen health and safety procedures. Here too, Mr. Speaker, the Government is breaking new ground by creating health and safety codes specially for Gibraltar, and the first policy establishes best industry practice guidelines that will be applicable initially to the public sector. Further, A new Health and Safety Advisory Council has been established, the composition of which has been decided under the newly introduced health and safety policy. The first meeting took place in May, and the next meeting, Mr. Speaker, is scheduled for September. Further still, the Department of Employment is proud to offer the services of an employment counsellor who is working side by side with the employment officers. The employment counsellor is a qualified therapeutic counsellor whose function is twofold. The first objective is to guide all persons who register as unemployed with regard to qualifications or training required to increase their employment prospects. And secondly, for the counsellor to visit the secondary schools and the Gibraltar College and make students aware of the fields or professions in which they are more likely to find employment in our labour market. The new structured programme is available to young persons between the ages of 14 to 19 in the form of workshops and one-to-one tuition on interviewing techniques, CV production and any other skills required by the unemployed that will assist them in gaining meaningful employment. The programme complements the services already offered by the Department of Education, which has a teacher in each of the secondary schools who offer career advice. The Employment Development Service, Mr. Speaker, is yet another strand of the government's multi-track employment strategies which aim to find employment opportunities for those seeking employment. Mr. Speaker, in respect of the Industrial Tribunal reform, given that we will debate the merits of the Employment Amendment Bill under which the Employment Tribunal reform will be ushered later on this month, I will only say here that the consultation in respect of this crucial reform is now complete, that the government is ready to proceed, and that I very much look forward to its implementation. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the rate of employment in Gibraltar. Mr. Speaker, before I am unfairly accused, as I was once by the Honourable Mr. Phillips, that the government is somehow playing with figures when citing our magnificent unemployment numbers, let me first take the House through the employment survey. In the first place, the Statistics Office confirms black on white, Mr. Speaker, the fact of growth in employee jobs in our economy. The total number of employee jobs in Gibraltar increased by 1,722 to 26,144. This, Mr. Speaker, is the highest number ever recorded and is a testament to the success of our economy. Mr. Speaker, we can also boast the highest number ever of Gibraltarians in employment at 11,010. Further, Mr. Speaker, it was the private sector, not the public sector, that saw a growth by 1,629 to 20,070 in October of last year. In this respect, the top three industries were, as you would expect, Mr. Speaker, construction, real estate and business activities, and hotel and restaurant industries. The public sector saw an increase of 132. As my colleague, the Honourable Minister Rossano, has explained in his contribution, the available Gibraltarian workforce at any one time is estimated by combining the numbers registered as seeking employment and those in employment. The exercise serves to indicate the reliability of the results of the employment survey since we are comparing data from two sources. The registered unemployed in October of 2014 was 306, and the comparable figure for 2015 was 268, a drop of 38. The number of Gibraltarians in part-time employment in October 15 is 38 more than the number in October of the previous year, as shown in the survey report. The total number of Gibraltarians in employment, however, only increased by 19 because in the same period there was a reduction in the numbers of Gibraltarian in full-time employment in the MOD in excess of 19. There has been an increase in part-time private sector jobs and a decline in MOD full-time jobs in the year between the two surveys that explains the net effect. The correlation of these results is, as the Honourable Minister Rossano has said, a sound indicator of the absolute accuracy of the picture painted by the survey report and the unemployment figures. Mr. Speaker, it is in the light of these statistics and the explanatory note provided on the employment survey by the Honourable Minister Rossano, which I have had no shame in pilfering just now for the purposes of explaining the survey, that I turn to consider the unemployment figures. As the House knows, the employment survey is in effect a snapshot of Gibraltar's labour market in October compared to the previous October. And it is for the purposes of making the employment survey intelligible that I revealed that the unemployment figure for the month of October 14 was 306 and it was 268 for October 15. In other words, Mr. Speaker, there is clearly a downward trend in the rate of unemployment. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, as this House is aware, 2015 saw the lowest ever level of recorded unemployment over the entire calendar year. In this respect, the quarterly averages were 282, 204, 207 and 255. And it has to be said, Mr. Speaker, that these employment statistics and the rate of employment do put to shame the record of the opposition when in government, which in almost 16 years saw the employment of fewer full-time Gibraltarians than we saw in 1 year. Think about that, Mr. Speaker. Think about that. There were, in 16 years when they were in government, fewer Gibraltarians employed than we managed to ensure in just 1 year in office. The GSLP Liberals, in 4 years since coming into office, have succeeded in assisting our economy to ensure 730 full-time jobs for Gibraltarians, while the GSD, in a period of almost 16 years, had ensured 337 full-time Gibraltarian jobs. Under the GSD, therefore, there was an average of 21 Gibraltarians employed a month, whereas our enviable record is an average of 182 Gibraltarians every year of our first 4 years in office. Mr. Speaker, in what is certainly further excellent news, 168 of the total of 276 trainees who are employed by the 5 government training companies are now employed in the private sector. Mr. Speaker, this House is also aware of the focused and concerted effort between my ministry and the Department of Employment in identifying vacancies with government-approved contractors. The conditions of the approved contractor scheme administered by the Honourable Minister Rossano stipulate that companies involved must ensure all employees are registered with the Department of Employment prior to commencing work and throughout the term of the contract. Furthermore, contractors are required to employ workers specifically identified to them by the employment surveys from the list of registered unemployed persons. My ministry, with the employment officers, have attended to organise interviews for individuals currently unemployed with the respective service providers. Furthermore, the Employment Career Service continues to organise training programmes on interviews and other skills to prepare the candidates for the forthcoming interviews. It's obviously intended that the interview skills seminars increase an applicant's chance of succeeding at the interview stage. Mr. Speaker, I cannot stress enough the tremendous level of work that has been undertaken to organise the interviews with these companies, and I publicly thank each and every member of the staff at my ministry and the employment officers for their meaningful and tireless efforts. I also congratulate the Careers Development Service for helping to improve the interview and presentation skills of the candidates. Mr. Speaker, ultimately, the successful selection of these applicants means that there will be a good number of previously unemployed persons in gainful employment. And even though, of course, it is very rewarding for us to assist the unemployed where we can, of far greater importance is the stability, meaning and purpose that comes, in fact, from being in employment. And therefore, it is very disappointing when unemployed persons do not attend interviews we arrange for them and sometimes turn down a job or sometimes more than one job offer, Mr. Speaker. Such a handful of persons may not realise that they make it just that little bit harder for other persons sent by my ministry and the Employment Service for an interview. As a result, Mr. Speaker, the Director of Employment has met with these individuals and advised them in no uncertain terms that failure to attend interviews or the refusal of job offers may prevent them from registering as unemployed for a period of time. In this respect, it is important to stress that my ministry and the employment services only arrange an interview with an employer if the unemployed person has already expressed an interest after being fully informed of the job description and the company. But in any case, Mr. Speaker, to continue on a positive note, it is very gratifying for me personally and as a government minister to report to this House that since we implemented our focused strategy of working closer with the government's approved contractors in June, we have identified 160 vacancies, we have arranged 202 interviews, and we have successfully ensured the employment of 88 previously unemployed persons over a 4-week period, Mr. Speaker. As a result, I think that there will be no doubt that we will be able to fill the vacancies that we've identified with approved contractors with those who register as unemployed. Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I will now read from a quote in a local magazine of a young Gibraltarian who said, and I quote, "I left Bayside with my GCSEs, but I'm not very academic, and A-levels and university weren't really for me. So I went down to employment, or up to employment, and a really great careers advisor helped me out. We worked on my CV, and soon enough I had a job in a gaming company. The company trained me, and after my 1-month trial, they offered me a permanent full-time job. I'm happy here, and I'm told that if I do well, there will be opportunities for me to move up through the company in the future. My parents are really proud of me, and it goes to show that there are opportunities for everyone if you are willing to work for it. And I'm not the only one. I've made friends who also got jobs after getting help and advice from the Employment Service, and I know that unemployment is down to an all-time low, which can only be a very good thing." End quote. Further, Mr. Speaker, if I may quote just one more person who recently said that Gibraltar leads a blessed life. We lead a blessed life living in Gibraltar. We have got very low levels of unemployment. We invest hugely in our caring, in our social services, in our education system, which funds our young people all the way to postgraduate level. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that I entirely agree with that statement, and I wish to place on the record formally my thanks to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition, for being gracious in verifying the success of the government's various employment strategies. It takes courage, Mr. Speaker, for the Leader of the Opposition to admit that the government's policies are bearing fruit and working effectively. Mr. Speaker, I therefore have no doubt that everybody, including clearly the Honourable gentleman opposite, agree that the increased number of Gibraltarians in the labour market and the reduced levels of unemployment is sensational news. Success breeds success, and I strongly believe that our economy will continue to develop even in the face of the recent current political changes that may be caused as a result of Brexit, to which I now turn briefly. Mr. Speaker, the times, they are a-changing, or are they? On the 24th of June, we awoke to the unthinkable reality that a plurality of UK citizens had voted to leave the European Union, even though we here in Gibraltar voted by an overwhelming 96% to remain. Whereas the referendum is merely advisory, the UK has still to start the process of extracting herself from the EU under Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, whilst all EU laws and fundamental freedoms continue to apply until the conclusion of the Article 50 process, and whereas there is doubt as to when or even whether the next UK Prime Minister will commence the process under Article 50, the government and this Parliament, I think, must proceed on the basis that Westminster will give effect to the will of the people as expressed in the referendum. Mr. Speaker, the political storm that has been unleashed in Westminster following the vote to leave is certainly unprecedented since my time following British politics. We do not know who will succeed the Prime Minister on the 9th of September, but we do know that he has said... Sorry? Theresa May. Yes, likely. But we do know that he has said that there may be a case for an early general election. The current frontrunner, Mrs. May, however, seems to have dismissed an early election and has said that Brexit means Brexit. Where that it be so simple, though, Mr. Speaker? A report by the top constitutional lawyers has set out that the Prime Minister will need parliamentary approval to trigger Article 50. There are various press reports that suggest and I recall specifically one reporting on that Tory grandee, Michael Heseltine, who said that because there is a majority of approximately 350 MPs who are against the UK leaving the EU, there could be resistance to vote in favour of the UK government starting the Article 50 process. On Monday, a UK newspaper carried the news that a prominent law firm had taken pre-action litigation against the UK government to seek assurances that Article 50 will not be commenced without an Act of Parliament. The article added that the law firm has instructions to pursue the matter through the courts if they are not satisfied that the UK government will follow the correct process to, and I quote, protect the constitution and sovereignty of Parliament in these unprecedented circumstances. Of course, it took government lawyers just a couple of days to come out to say that in their view, the Prime Minister could in fact start the Article 50 process without reference to Parliament. Further, in the event that a snap election were called, we have to wait and see which party, if any, has a majority and how such a majority intend to deal with the referendum result. At this point, the Liberal Democrats have committed to keeping Britain in Europe, and the Labour Party are undergoing what can be kindly characterised as an internal leadership tumult. What is clear is that the resignation en masse of the Labour front bench and the vote of no confidence in Mr Corbyn, resulting in 172 votes against and 40 in favour, has arisen due to what is generally perceived to be Mr Corbyn's lacklustre advocacy for Britain to stay within the EU during the campaign. Further, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has announced that there is no chance of a second referendum, notwithstanding the petition that has garnered over 4 million signatures, and he has set up a new cross-department advisory unit. But notwithstanding that statement, Mr Speaker, from the UK Prime Minister, one cannot help but remember the time that the Irish voted on the Lisbon Treaty in a referendum and rejected the Lisbon Treaty, and then of course held a second referendum and voted in favour, thereby achieving what the establishment thought was the right result. Straightforward so far, is it not, Mr Speaker? And Mr Speaker, one really is left wondering why the Prime Minister, in a representative democracy, where Parliament is a supreme decision-making forum, called for a referendum on the UK's membership of the EU in the first place, not least given that he subsequently campaigned with so much ardour and enthusiasm for Britain to stay. And where surely it would have been enough for Mr Cameron to keep to his earlier promise to hold a referendum on any new treaty, rather than to hold a referendum on membership, I cannot but express profound regret for the various wildly unsubstantiated claims made by the Leave campaign, for which they have, subsequent to the vote, tried to walk back. It is nothing short of shameful, Mr Speaker, that statements were made that were clearly not accurate, and which we can assume will have led millions to vote to leave the EU. It is even more incredible still, shocking really, that the architects of the Leave campaign have clearly been caught out without a plan for Britain outside of the EU. And to boot, the leader of the Leave campaign has decided not to stand for the leadership of the Conservative Party after having led the Leave campaign, and for which he must assume part of the political responsibility. And the less said about Mr Farage and his resignation, I think, the better. The House will no doubt condemn such reckless disregard for truth in political debates and for the very real consequences that could arise for our present stability, Mr Speaker. While Westminster, however, is consumed by the fallout of the referendum vote, we in Gibraltar have pulled together and are more determined than ever before to get this process exactly right. Our community will have seen the government and the opposition close ranks, and will have witnessed the Honourable the Chief Minister and the Honourable the Deputy Chief Minister waste no time whatever in meeting with the UK government to fully and robustly put forward Gibraltar's position. Gibraltar also knows that the government is exploring every possible avenue to discuss all options. Further, we on this side of this House are meeting with all of our respective stakeholders to discuss the present situation and to analyse in detail the various models available depending on the different possible permutations that may emerge. We stand, Mr Speaker, of course ready in solidarity with our entire community, to work harder than ever before and leave no stone unturned in searching for opportunities in what is currently a sea of uncertainty. And Mr. Speaker, the fruits of the work of the Chief Minister and the Deputy Chief Minister are already evident, as the Prime Minister himself has said that the UK government will involve Gibraltar when negotiating a new deal with the EU to protect and safeguard Gibraltar's interests. This, of course, is excellent news and will be welcomed by the entire community and by the financial and business sectors. Mr. Speaker, it is to the extent that nothing has happened to sever the relationship with the EU after the referendum, business as usual. Given that no further steps towards separation from the EU will take place until September at the earliest, this gives the government, the Parliament and all sectors of our community the time and the space to carefully consider all our options, firmly establish Gibraltar's position with the UK government and stress the importance of full access to the single market, and for us, of course, to continue the vital work of looking at all models. It is time, Mr. Speaker, for cool heads, sober analysis and a lot of hard work. It is time, Mr. Speaker, for us in this House to lead. Our compatriots can rest assured that the government will continue, as until now, to be fully accessible and to be fully engaged in the important work of addressing their concerns and working to fulfil their aspirations. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I thank all of my staff and my ministry, the Office of Fair Trading, the Department of Employment, the Department of Social Security and the Royal Gibraltar Post Office for the, at almost all times, unforgiving pace they have come to expect and love from me, and for the unceasing support in delivering our exciting programme for government. It is true to say, Mr. Speaker, that it would simply not be possible for me to have been able to stand in this House to make as many announcements or to report on the completion of as many projects without them, and I owe all of them therefore a very big thank you. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I take the opportunity to thank yourself and the kind, patient and excellent assistance of your staff, namely the clerk, Francis, Kevin and Danny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.